Did you know that some countries are quietly punishing Indian businesses with sky-high tariffs? Indian exporters are losing billions, just because certain nations want to protect their own markets at India's expense. Welcome to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an eye-opening update. Today, we're diving into the top 10 countries that have imposed the highest tariffs on Indian goods. From unexpected neighbors to major global players, these countries are making it extremely difficult for Indian businesses to compete by slapping huge import duties on everything from textiles to pharmaceuticals. We'll uncover who they are, what they're taxing, and why it matters not just for India, but for global trade too. 10. Brazil. Brazil has imposed high tariffs on Indian exports such as pharmaceuticals, textiles, and chemicals. Import duties can go up to 35%, making Indian goods expensive and less competitive in the Brazilian market. Brazil justifies these tariffs by aiming to protect its domestic industries and support local employment. Even though Brazil and India share strong diplomatic ties through platforms like BRICS, trade relations remain challenging due to regulatory hurdles. Non-tariff barriers, like quality certifications and bureaucratic red tape, further complicate exports. Indian auto parts and machinery manufacturers are especially affected. While there's potential for increased bilateral trade, high duties and logistical inefficiencies hinder growth. Brazil's complex tariff system remains a major obstacle for Indian exporters trying to establish a solid foothold in South America's largest economy. 9. Argentina. Argentina enforces high tariffs on Indian goods such as electronics, chemicals, and clothing. These import duties typically range from 20% to 35%, making Indian products costly for Argentine consumers. The country follows a protectionist approach to support its struggling local industries and reduce its dependency on imports. Indian pharmaceutical firms face considerable difficulties entering the market due to both tariffs and strict regulatory policies. Additionally, customs procedures in Argentina are often slow and unpredictable. Despite the potential for greater trade between the two nations, Argentina's volatile economy and high inflation make it difficult for Indian companies to invest and expand. The lack of a trade agreement and poor ease of doing business conditions mean Indian exporters face a tough time establishing a reliable market presence in Argentina. 8. Indonesia. Indonesia has imposed substantial tariffs on various Indian exports such as steel, textiles, and processed foods. These tariffs often range from 10% to 30%, and Indian exporters must also navigate strict non-tariff barriers like licensing requirements and halal certification. Tensions escalated when India restricted palm oil imports from Indonesia, prompting retaliatory tariffs on Indian goods. While India and Indonesia are part of the ASEAN-India Free Trade Agreement, loopholes and exceptions have allowed Indonesia to maintain high duties on certain products. Indian pharmaceuticals and automobiles have especially struggled to enter the Indonesian market. Moreover, shifting trade policies and inconsistent enforcement of agreements make it harder for Indian exporters to operate. Despite geographical proximity and economic potential, India's access to the Indonesian market remains limited by tariffs and regulatory hurdles. 7. Turkey. Turkey has levied high tariffs on Indian goods like ceramics, textiles, and automobile components. For example, Turkey imposed additional duties on Indian polyester yarn and fabrics, which severely impacted India's textile industry. The Turkish government's intent is to support domestic producers and reduce reliance on foreign imports. In recent years, Turkey has increased import taxes on over 800 products, many of which are exported from India. Political tensions and diverging economic policies between the two nations have only added to the challenges. Indian exporters also face unpredictable customs procedures and frequent changes in import regulations. While trade potential exists, Indian companies find it hard to navigate Turkey's complex trade framework. These high tariffs remain a major barrier to increasing exports and improving bilateral trade ties. 6. European Union. The European Union, EU. Imposes high tariffs and strict regulatory standards on Indian goods, particularly textiles, chemicals, and agricultural products. While some Indian goods enter under preferential treatment, many still face duties between 8% and 20%. Non-tariff barriers like environmental regulations, product certifications, and labor standards further complicate trade. Indian rice, tea, and spices are often blocked due to pesticide or quality concerns. Negotiations for a free trade agreement between India and the EU have stalled for years over disagreements on tariffs and market access. Additionally, the EU's proposed carbon tax may impact Indian steel and aluminum exports. These challenges make Indian goods less competitive in European markets. Although the EU is a major trade partner, high tariffs continue to limit India's export potential in the region. 5. China. China, despite being one of India's largest trading partners, imposes high tariffs on a range of Indian exports including pharmaceuticals, IT products, and dairy. Tariff rates can go up to 25% depending on the product. Non-tariff barriers such as long approval processes, rigid quality standards, and frequent policy changes also restrict market access. Indian pharmaceutical companies face severe challenges entering the Chinese market, often losing out to local producers. Despite India's demand for balanced trade, the gap continues to widen due to China's resistance to reduce import duties on Indian goods. Diplomatic tensions, especially following border disputes, have further worsened the trade climate. While India imports heavily from China, its exports face strict scrutiny, making China a tough market to penetrate despite enormous potential. 4. Bangladesh. Bangladesh, although sharing strong geographic and cultural ties with India, imposes some of the highest tariffs on Indian goods among South Asian nations. Products like garments, automobiles, and electronics often face import duties ranging from 25% to 35%. In addition to tariffs, Indian exports are also subject to value-added tax, VAT, and supplementary duties. These policies are designed to protect Bangladesh's growing manufacturing sector. Even though both countries are part of SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Area, exemptions and additional duties are frequently used to restrict Indian products. Indian exporters face bureaucratic delays and inconsistent customs enforcement. Cement, spices, and food items from India are particularly affected. While trade continues, high tariffs and regulatory barriers remain a major concern in India-Bangladesh economic relations. 3. United States. The United States has placed high tariffs on key Indian exports, particularly steel, aluminum, textiles, and agricultural items. After revoking India's eligibility under the Generalized System of Preferences, GSP, in 2019, many Indian goods lost duty-free access to the U.S. market. Tariffs on Indian steel are as high as 25%, and on aluminum, up to 10%. India has also faced increasing regulatory scrutiny on items like shrimp and spices. Disputes over digital taxation and e-commerce laws have further complicated trade talks. While both countries maintain strong diplomatic ties, trade negotiations often stall over tariff disagreements and market access issues. Despite growing trade volumes, high duties continue to limit Indian exporters' competitiveness in the U.S., particularly in manufacturing and agriculture sectors. 2. Iran. Iran, once a major trade partner of India, now imposes high tariffs on Indian consumer goods, machinery, and pharmaceuticals. These tariffs often exceed 30%, especially as Iran attempts to support its domestic industry amid international sanctions. The depreciation of the Iranian rial and restrictions on international payments have made trade riskier and more expensive for Indian exporters. Although India once imported large amounts of oil from Iran, current trade mostly includes rice, tea, and medicine. However, even these sectors are heavily taxed and face bureaucratic hurdles. Iran's internal policies are unpredictable, and the trade framework lacks transparency. Combined with geopolitical tension and logistical challenges, high tariffs have significantly reduced India's trade footprint in Iran in recent years. 1. Pakistan. Pakistan tops the list with the highest tariffs on Indian goods, largely driven by political hostility rather than economic policy. Following India's revocation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir in 2019, Pakistan suspended all bilateral trade and imposed a 200% tariff on Indian imports. Even before the trade freeze, Pakistani tariffs on Indian cement, pharmaceuticals, and food products were already among the highest in the region. There is currently little to no formal trade happening between the two countries. Despite being members of SAFTA, political tensions have overruled economic logic. For Indian exporters, Pakistan remains an inaccessible and hostile market. With no signs of normalization, high tariffs and trade restrictions are expected to continue, completely blocking any export potential to this neighboring country.